So I'm going to go ahead and get started then. Like I said, because I have my esteemed colleagues on the phone, and as much as you'd like to argue that's not the case, I believe that, which is why for our inaugural Thought Leadership Series event, I thought, well, who else could I possibly get to kick this off for IT Savvy than the two of you? So for everyone who's joined us today, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. This is the first of what will be a series that IT Savvy will be doing approximately every 6 weeks or so. The reason that I actually thought about this is throughout my career, I've had the opportunity, whether it be at a conference or a networking event, where sometimes I felt like, how did I get a seat at this table with these leaders in my industry? And I would just sit there and listen. And then with these particular gentlemen, I actually even have a monthly call when we can fit it into our schedules, where I get to be a fly on the wall and just listen to these brilliant leaders in our industry talk about things which they'll say, oh, not me, I'm not, but honestly, it's really been a pleasure for me to be able to have that opportunity. And I thought, well, let's open that up to as many people as we can, because the best thing we can do in this industry is, especially in these times, is be collaborative. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Sam Curry and I know each other in a capacity in two ways. He's my former coworker, as well as an advisory board member for IT Savvy. So he's been integral in helping us build out this program. I'm the vice president of cybersecurity strategy for IT Savvy. So as you can imagine, as IT professionals in the security space, you're constantly working on strategy, whether that be, from the fundamentals of a framework, but we all know that a lot of that comes from the collaboration that we have within our communities. Ricardo and I have known each other, Ricardo Lafosse, the esteemed, I know now I just have to say the word just to get your reaction, the CISO for Kraft Heinz, a company, co-located, one here in Chicago where I am. That's where I've had the privilege of meeting Ricardo and getting to know him through the cybersecurity community here in Chicago, through the CISO community here, but also, seeing each other, throughout the country at various events where he spends a lot of time, speaking and, meeting with other leaders in the space, as does Sam. So in doing so, I thought, bringing these two together, the thing that they share, regardless of the vertical that they're in, regardless of the company that they work for, is a shared perspective of what is the journey that we're all on? What does the future look like for us? So all of us have spent the last 12 months talking about a new normal. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about a new normal. So after 12 months, what have we learned? And now where are we going? So we won't belabor the last 12 months. I think we've covered a lot of that, although that will organically be sprinkled into the conversation today, because their perspective is so good because of all of the experience that they have, and of course 2020 is part of that. But they're optimistic and they're looking forward, and they've both developed very interesting strategies for their companies and for our industry, and how we're all going to be moving forward in the new normal. So with that, I have a number of questions, but thought before we got into it, I'd level set a little bit. I thought I'd start with you, Ricardo. I thought I'd start with you because you have an interesting perspective in that you also started a new position about this time last year. So not only were you building what you thought would be a new cybersecurity program in normal times, you were doing that within a pandemic. Was curious to see, kind of your reflection on that, but then also kind of what your vision is now, now that you have that 12 months in a very interesting time under your belt. And of course, Sam, sprinkle in wherever this is, we talk all the time, so you'll see everyone is that this will become just a bouncing back and forth conversation as we continue over the next.
I didn't realize Ricardo had started his position a year ago. And that must be awful, but then I thought, is it a coincidence? I don't know.
Sam, this is why I can't bring you anywhere.
We have too much fun doing it. I'll let you field your question.
No, really appreciate everyone taking the time out today. And if the Q&A does work, again, I haven't done a WebEx in a little bit, please feel free to throw questions at us. Let's make it a little bit interactive instead of just a bickering between Sam and I. It may go into video games and odd corners if you guys don't guys and gals keep us straight. So new norm, I think it's just a hybrid of the old, to be honest. Many organizations have gone through major transitions during the COVID pandemic. I think probably the biggest disruptor for us was, as a large manufacturer, we weren't used to remote work as a norm. So I think it was more of a cultural change. I think many individuals here on the call also experienced that same dynamic shift where I used to get on the train or drive, get to work, sit at the desk, finish, and do that whole commute back. And now it's become on off. It's very binary now. And being able to ensure that your remote workforce culturally has the tools and process to be successful in a remote location, and being able to be safe and secure at the same time. As we know, specifically those with children, there's crazy stuff on your network at any given time. So there was new nuances that were introduced to the threat profile of many organizations. For us, we took a very traditional approach and said, you're going home, you're doing VPN, and we'll charge the path forward from there. We were fortunate enough that we did have a very strong posture on our endpoints. For example, USB, there's no split tunneling within VPN. Your very traditional controls on the endpoint were already in place. But I think what really exposed us to a new norm was the adoption of SaaS vendors. So if you go to your CIO and say, how many SaaS vendors? They may say, I don't know, maybe 50, 100. You have thousands. You just don't know about them. So I think going through this remote workforce has really identified the overabundance of SaaS applications that you didn't have opportunities to review or have proper controls and process around. So for us, we were able to adapt and identify or start identifying those, not shadow IT, but those SaaS applications we were not privy to in the past. So I think it was an eye-opening experience for us, and also being able to not bend the rules, but to have that nice balance between usability and security controls. Really, right off the bat when I started, we all went home, we started VPN, and we understood, wow, Teams is so choppy, and our internet's being saturated so bad. I wonder why. All the video chats were being funneled through the VPN to our main egress and then out to the SaaS provider. And we said, why don't we do something smart? Why don't we bifurcate that and have Microsoft Teams traffic go straight to Microsoft, and then the sensitive information goes straight through the tunnel. So being able to make those quick decisions and not impeding the transformation and the business, yet allowing to have those ongoing security controls is really key for us. And those popped up throughout the years. So again, it's not a new world. It's just a different way of working, like a fresh coat of paint almost.
Interesting.
Can I go counterpoint on that, Katie? Is that
That's the idea.
yeah, there we go. You said bickering. We don't usually bicker. We usually get along and riff off each other. But I first of all, my company was largely remote already, unlike yours, I think. But I think I was saying even just a few months ago that phase 3 will be distinct from 1 and 2, and I don't think it's just the hybrid of the two, and here's why. We've gotten used to, when we're outside the building now, having all these services to the point. I mean, I manage my systems as if really I was in an internet cafe. I presume that my networks are infected. But what's different is I still have a LAN back at the office. And when I bring those systems back in, that's something different. It's not the before state and it's not the after state. It's this porous back and forth. So if everyone's out and the machine goes down, I don't care, right? Because I can re-image it. It's effective. I could run it over with a car. Please don't, but I could. And I could be back up and running as long as it takes me to get a new machine or to get to a new machine. But when that machine starts to travel in and out, it now potentially exposes peers in a way that never would have been possible before. And I don't know if that's true for you, Ricardo, given your environment and how sensitive perhaps the network is, the intranet and the internet, the internal network. I would recommend people actually set up a clinic of sorts. So if people are coming back into the office and sitting at a desk, if something feels off, they can come through the clinic, or you can pipe it through, not urgently, just bring them through and sanitize them before, letting them continue. See, if something feels strange, or here's your appointment, come on by. I don't think you need to have it as a bottleneck to getting back to your desk, but my suspicion is that something is different about phase 3. And I think there's a phase 4. And the reason I'm going to say that is I'm hearing a lot of sociological speak and psychological speak, like take security out of it. People are talking about we may get a roaring 20s. I mean, imagine if we beat this virus. Let's look down the road, right? Let's say 5 years from now, and work your way backwards to the day, like a VE day, right? Like, hey, we won. What will it be like sociologically after that when people are no longer constrained? And so I'm reminded, by the way, and I think I gave this analogy with you before, Ricardo. I said, if you go back to 1935, let's look at women in the workplace. About 1 in 5 women in the manufacturing workplace, 1 in 5 people was a woman. In 1945, it was like 4 out of 5, because, of course, a lot of men were off at war and they were being used in industry. In 1955, it was down to 1 in 10. So if in 1945 you'd say, are women going to be a part of the work for the manufacturing workforce going forward? You'd be like, it's irreversible. This is the new normal. And you're just too close to it. I don't think we know all the socio and psychological factors that come into play yet for that phase 4. So I'm taking with a grain of salt when people say, I've figured out phase 4 or the new normal or the new normal or whatever they say. But I think the immediate phase where we're getting towards herd immunity, people have vaccinations, the kids are starting to go back to school. You might hear mine in a minute, by the way. At that point, I think we're in not just a hybrid, and it would be dangerous to just think, well, we got phase 1 and phase 2 covered, we got phase 3. I think there's something new to pay attention to. And some of it will have to do with, I think the bad guys are going to shift gears too. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
No, it does. And I will counterpoint part of that.
Go for it. Yeah.
And the counterpoint with that is the whole cafe scenario. How does that differ except in volume of, say, an executive or anyone at the company going to a conference or going to a coffee shop and coming back? We haven't had the traditional cleansing.
I don't care about the endpoint itself, because with the exception of like my IP workers or those with insider information who I lock down much more rigorously, the average marketing person, salesperson, not to denigrate them or anything, most of those laptops, there's nothing that can be compromised precisely because of the services. Yep. If somebody's sitting on the box and can compromise it, I'm like, okay, like they don't have, I do my access control in such a way that they just cannot cause that much, if any, material damage. But when the box comes back in, it is potentially usable to piggyback into networks where there are things exposed. Because I haven't been back to the office now in, I was like joking the other day, it's like March. I guess now it's March 367 from last year, right?
No one's counting.
13th March in a row. Yeah. I don't think I'm unique in that. Like I was mostly remote anyway, right? Yeah. When the manufacturing line for you, I'm inferring, right? So this is me putting on my Ricardo hat, so you can tell me you got it all wrong. But when the manufacturing line is on the same network as the knowledge worker who just came back, you're not just talking about that one knowledge worker having the inconvenience of no system for a day. It could be used to piggyback, is my point. But then the attackers, I mean, what did we see last year? We saw an increase in phishing, an increase in DDoS, and they just took everything off the shelf and threw it at us, so volume went up. But we've started to see more innovation. And my fear is the longer it takes to go back, the more they will have developed attacks, especially social networking exploitation. You know, they know my wife sits next to me. They can find out what she does. It's all available. I have 2 children. They can find out the schools. I have networks, right? I have systems. I have home automation. Voice to text is remarkably simple. The exploits for printers, for ancient routers. I have a printer here that's 10 years old right next to me, right? And I've patched my router, but how many people have? Right? That's still massively vulnerable. So I think that they will shift the targets and they'll start to come in through the soft home office soon. And there's an opportunity, by the way, for us to firm that up and strengthen it. Maybe some entrepreneurs can do some cool things then. Maybe IT savvy, actually. Who knows? Yeah.
No, I think that's very valid. Specifically on the IoT side, I really like the approach of hitting closer to home because the defenses are there, and your best offense is turn your house off. You're not going to do that. Are you going to tell your kid not to do e-learning?
No, that's not happening.
It's a very soft target. So no. See, we're aligned.
So I saw one of the best exploits I saw that sort of drove it home for me was a video where we call her who should never be named, Alexa, right? Somebody took a bullhorn outside a house and yelled out, "Alexa, open garage door," and the garage door opened. And this was not just one house, like two houses on the street, right? Because the home automation was there, and the assumption was, oh, voice is in the house, but somebody with a bullhorn outside can still be picked up by the very sensitive audio. It was a reminder that there's a lot of speakers of very high quality around, relatively low security in those stacks, if not none in some cases, and then the ability with high compute to do things like the crunching to do voice to text. It's a very small amount of text to pipe out a conversation as opposed to voice or video.
Yeah.
Katie, did we go off on a tangent too far? And
Well, it was
are there any
interesting.
questions from the audience?
Yes, good call.
There weren't any yet. I actually was going to say, go ahead. Please don't be shy. I know this too. They love it. They love sharing their knowledge and insight. So please, please, please don't be shy. I will monitor them as they come up. I was going to say, it's funny that you brought that up because, from a manufacturing perspective, I have the, opportunity from my perspective in meeting with a lot of different clients all the time, right? We're different verticals, different types and sizes. And we were just talking about, someone being able to actually boot up a machine remotely and even the safety ramifications around that. So someone was in their warehouse and suddenly a machine booted up and it was done as kind of a prank to point out, hey, this is an option for an attacker and a vector to get into our organization. And for them, it mattered because it caused downtime, but from a security perspective, it had significant ramifications as well. So I agree with
Katie,
you.
you just gave me a flashback. And it's all about stories. 97, the first time I saw a physical effect from a hack, as opposed to hacking and electronic effects and so on. I was in a lab and somebody used at the time, please forgive the name, it was called Back Orifice, and they made my CD drawer. Back then we had
I remember
that. Had it eject, and I leapt out of my seat. It's like when you're at home alone and it's dark and windy and the power goes out and then you hear footsteps. And then you're like, oh no, it's actually something on the roof. But no, there they are again. It's that chilled feeling. We do live in a world where it's still chilled. I do want to emphasize, there have been very few deaths due to hacking. And people will use a lot of hype right now. Cyber war, cyber terrorism, that sort of thing. There's been a few. There were 2 plane crashes that had to do with malware. Spanair had that happen from Spain. And there's also been reports, at least, of death around ransomware in some hospitals, although it's also possible they're for medical reasons rather than just ransomware, but there was some coincidence there. But the potential as we go and wire up more and more and IoT starts to hit us, the potential to have kinetic effects goes way up. Not too much of a tangent, but that's what you made me think of, Katie.
I couldn't agree more, but I love stories like that. And now I'm kind of thinking, like, what could we do now?
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. We'll get Alexa to start talking back to you from 3 houses down. That'll be something.
If you want to have fun, by the way, on podcasts and webinars, you say, Alexa, play Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. And some people who are listening right now might have just been rickrolled by me, and I don't apologize. So feel free to continue. Yeah.
I did think of that when you started saying Alexa. I was like, well, I don't have one in this room.
I actually renamed one in my room, so in this room.
Oh, right.
Probably shouldn't be anywhere. The kids are downstairs in my office. So.
Well, before we move on we did get a question coming in, but before we moved on, we kind of hit on something a little bit in terms of remote workforce. I don't want to leave that before, because I think there's a really good question that I had gotten beforehand that someone had asked. So I'm gonna put this one in first, and then we'll go to the question that just came in. A lot of the people on the phone on this webinar are people who may not have a huge organization, but they may have gone out during the last 12 months and been able to hire remotely in a way that they haven't been able to do before, getting talent. As you know, we're always talking about the cybersecurity talent shortage in our industry. So as you're looking looking to the new normal, if things do become a little bit more normalized in terms of some offices opening, like how are both of you looking at building out your cybersecurity team? And has that changed now that remote working is something that's much more prevalent? And in what ways are you going out to seek? Are you getting additional talent? That was kind of the cusp of the question that I had gotten before.
Yeah, I'll answer first because I think I have a smaller organization than Ricardo does. Most of my R&D is in really 2 locations, and there's still a belief that security folks need to be close to R&D. I got to tell you, I don't care, honestly. I think it's important is for one of my programs is security for SDLC, software development lifecycles. So for them to be able to sit in design reviews and take part in stand-ups and sprints, and it's really DevSecOps. That has a little bit more meaning, but if this continues much longer, those teams aren't meeting face to face right now anyway. So I'm still hiring on the basis that I'm going to need that near them, but everybody else I don't care. And in fact, today one of my QA guys, to divulge, at 2 p.m. one of our QA guys deployed some Mimikatz, and I got an alert about it. And the main person who normally deals with that is in Israel, and I was able to deal with someone in the US and someone in Japan because I didn't have to worry. I have people in every time zone, almost, right? So we were able to find out, oh yeah, he was just testing something, but within 20 minutes, we'd identified it and it's honed in because I have more, not just SOC, but I have more on-staff personnel in all the other functions I do from a security perspective. But it's harder to overcome some of the cultural issues. But I'm fascinated. Ricardo, how about you? How has it changed for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's opened the candidate pool quite exponentially. So there's some positions that, as you said, are better suited to be closer to the business. For example, disaster recovery with a lot of our core business being in Chicago, we'd like to have it in the general vicinity. But say Pacific or Eastern time is totally fine, but having someone in UK running the full DR might be a little difficult just from a time zone perspective. But we are, as a global organization, have coverage globally from a security perspective. Some areas are better than others from amount of people there, but we run it as a global operation with different shifts and different time zones. So for us, it's opened the pool of candidates. We're really excited to be able to, say, hire someone in Spain with that mid time zone. Now it might be under UK. Let's move a little bit more. We could hire someone in Romania, or is that also UK? As you can tell, my geography is horrible, or knowing what time zones
East,
are.
West.
East, West. Regardless, I can have a greater span of coverage with expertise in those different regions. So very similar to your example with the Mimikatz. You'll say, oh yeah, he or she's been working on this, and FY in case you see something pop up. But I think the hardest part for us has been that cultural inclusion and that social interaction. There no longer is a typical water cooler. We have group events as much as we can, even though we're diverse from different time zones, to have that inclusiveness within the team. Because I think that's probably the most important aspect of this new world, and having people interact with one another that is organically driven and not forced. If you say, all right, we are having a happy hour at 4 p.m. today. Cool, but that's 3 a.m. at this time zone. It doesn't work out. And also when you force those type of activities, there's resistance or exclusion actually by creating those forced events. So it's been a combination for us of having almost like social collaboration within the zones, not just within security, but IT or the business in that zone, to have them more inclusive in that time zone, to help them feel more welcomed and collaborative. We recently just hired an individual in Australia, and that's a crazy hard time zone to work with as well, as you know, with Japan, because I think they're very similar. There's never a good time, except I think 3 p.m.
Never.
Like right now is a good time for them, like right now, but that's it.
But it changes because they're 2 hours off the rest of the year, so it's 2 hours.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it is difficult to work with those arrangements, but you do what you can. You bootstrap, you try to do grassroots efforts. If you're not able to be there, maybe you have another IT liaison or a business partner in that area to be like a buddy to get them used to the organization. So those type of tactics have been pretty successful. I'm saying this now I'll ask the gentleman a few months from now if he is in an island, all puns intended, or or does he feel included with the team?
Yeah, and one day, by the way, somebody asked me seriously. They said, with advances in deepfake technology and filter technology and stuff, and even voice alteration and translation software, could somebody join the team who either doesn't exist or is an impersonator and maybe doesn't even speak English? And I said, look, one day that's possible. It's still science fiction, but then we'll develop defenses for it. We'll figure out latency in things. We'll figure out where they are geographically. We'll figure out word choice in sentences. Eventually, it will always be possible, but that's not here today. And by the way, there's no guarantee the person who actually turns up in your office for a physical interview isn't also a mole or an imposter. So
That's
yeah.
a whole different ballgame.
So I think now we're off topic. So apologies.
Well, I love a good corporate espionage story. So
It's fun. Who
I
doesn't,
mean,
right?
those are the most interesting for sure. I guess we'll talk about some of those offline, but I do want to get to this question because I think that what they're asking here is something important, something I wanted to touch on today too, because I think what they're asking here is kind of has your strategy, how has it shifted in terms of automation and the cloud? They use the word virtualization services or appliances compared to pre-pandemic, but I think it also speaks to the broader question and what I know both of you would have a lot to say about in terms of cloud migration, securing that, and then also it brings us to data protection, data loss, and even insider threat data loss, and also privacy standards around the data that you have and where you're putting it. So that could probably give us another 15 hours of conversation. But I think it's important because again, we've spent the last 12 months doing some very important things, from a hygiene perspective, getting everyone operational. But we still have the future of our industry, which was always moving that way, anyways, into the cloud. But there's just
By
more
the
and more
way,
data. What are we going to do with it?
Katie, for a future one of these, we could do a whole session just on trust or lack thereof.
Right? Yeah.
And zero trust. Do you really want it or not? That kind of thing. But I don't want to derail you here, so I'll let you continue. But mental note for a future one of these.
I agree. I think that's a great point. And I think that, and it's part of that, when I read that question, can you guys see the questions as well from your perspective? Can you
I don't see it. Feel free to read it
Okay,
out.
so
Is it the QA? There
Oh,
it
I
is.
see it. I see it on the Q&A.
Oh, I was looking at chat. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot there wrapped up in that question, and kind of trying to keep this in line of what is the new normal, and what have we learned, where are we going, but I did want to touch on data privacy from that lens as well before we left the call today.
I'll tackle this one. How
Okay.
much are any of you implementing virtualization services or appliances compared to pre-pandemic? For me, everything I do is cloud first. Yes, I have an premises product, but we built and run on GCP and Amazon and now on Oracle as well. Google, of course, is the biggest, but we already were largely cloud-based with a heavy use of virtualization and really gaining efficiencies, because I'm not interested in the high cost of goods sold. And I don't like what for every dollar that comes in, my biggest checkout is to Bezos or to Google or what have you. But as for post-pandemic, that hasn't really changed for me. And I don't really have I tend to do more cloud-based virtualization just by virtue of I don't want to build out large infrastructures like that. I think for most companies, there's huge gains in doing that. But I was once asked, is the cloud more secure? I said, absolutely, for now. And then eventually it won't be. And then not at all, right? So like you don't abdicate security if this is a security-based question because of that, which you get gains and it becomes a more attractive target over time to attackers. So in essence, cloud is a supply chain issue. And so you can't just be held at arm's length. Like they can't just do the Heisman and hold you back and say, don't worry, I got this. No. You need to do things like VPC flow monitoring, right? And you need to be looking at things like CloudTrail, and you need to be taking responsibility for what paths there are through all of your environments, and then what your controls are and being able to monitor it. So, but I'll let Ricardo field this because I think for you didn't have the before state that I had.
No, lucky guy. So for us, we're very traditional. We have data centers globally, supporting a lot of our main processes. However, as an organization, over the last, say, 12 months, we are going down the infamous digital transformation. So really using data and analytics to help drive value added for the organization and really start shifting from a traditional manufacturer to a digitally enabled manufacturer, which is super exciting, specifically coming from such a large, old organization, really adopting this new technology. Specific to the question, we have always been a heavy virtualization shop on premise, and we have a pretty good process around. Yes, we are adopting cloud. We have services in the cloud. However, we've put a very big stick in the ground to say we're not lifting and shifting for any reason, because we already have the sunk cost within the data centers, and it doesn't make sense unless we're refactoring or starting net new. So new applications or new initiatives, we do a feasibility analysis as best as we can to see, is it cloud first? Is it cloud friendly, to ensure we're not spinning up a VM in the cloud? Because if you just run a typical application on a VM in the cloud, your costs are going to be higher than running it in the data center, regardless if you have to buy new hardware. So we go through that feasibility analysis and identify, is it better for the cloud or on premise? And as an organization, we're trying to ensure that we are right sizing and choosing the best applications that fit our business case that are cloud first as much as we can.
Anything to add, Sam?
No, it makes sense. I have been in this situation previously where I had larger, more classical infrastructure, but for me, but for my development environment, I have very little where I manage the hardware.
Yeah, we're shifting most of our development, if not all, to the cloud because it's a lot easier and it's all integrated. For example, if you want to put in all your SSDLC hooks, they're already built into the framework for your CI/CD pipeline in the cloud. Why reinvent the wheel on premise? It doesn't make sense. Yep. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, it was a great question, and so please keep them coming. I mean, I always have a lot of questions, so I'm going to take advantage. I mean, one of those might be and I have some of my own, but I actually did get one other one that somebody wanted to cover. In terms of looking at the past, and everyone's talked about the SolarWinds breach. Okay, I think everyone to death almost. But I think in this context, when we're looking to the future and new attack vectors, what are you doing, or what do you foresee, and where are you making putting the most energy on your team in terms of research, in terms of tools, in terms of adding, augmenting your staff to get prepared for what you foresee to be the next type of attack vector? What's the next?
Well, I don't think we should discount SolarWinds so fast, because the attack that attacked SolarWinds, right, various names, Sunspot, Sunburst, and Supernova, and everything else. Look, SolarWinds itself, I'm rather disappointed that they blamed an intern and a weak password. It doesn't feel right to me. But I wasn't on the inside there. But I know that downstream of that, everybody did security correctly. And I know that there was a signed patch, was a side-loaded DLL, and they had all the checkboxes to minimize risk. Absolutely. But we know that advanced attackers are hiding. They use identities. That's easy, but they hide in processes that are legitimate. They take actions and use ports that are legitimate. It's relatively simple with a modern attacker's toolkit, not just hiding in plain sight or living off the land or fileless malware, but to put the threads for what you're trying to do into another system, into a process's memory space. This is not hard to do. And so, look, I'm a big believer in behavioral defenses, but I won't wax poetic on that. I think what we need to do is say, let's assume, because I think you said thousands earlier, Ricardo. I certainly have hundreds of explicit vendors in my third tier, and it's tens of thousands in my fourth tier. It's supply, with like open source and by the way, there's some interesting hacks for open source out there right now. Like you can put in a build path, a version with a very high version number of something that people are just including, and presto, something's been sucked into a build. But I think if we work on the assumption that, like, first of all, assume that it is happening. Now, what do you look for to find it? How do you mitigate the damage when it happens? How do you isolate things? I'm starting to like this, lots of little walled areas rather than one big perimeter. And I mean, the wall could be as small as around a system. But I also think there's an opportunity for innovation. So going back upstream, we can do a lot if we affect the SSDLCs of everybody else. We can get them to do things like apply machine learning to has the source code changed significantly in a way that human beings couldn't do between one commit and another? Like, and are there more objects in this than you normally have? Like, by the way, you have 2 extra DLLs and it's a patch. What's going on? Like, that's weird. There's things we can do, in other words, upstream, that provide certainty downstream. And then finally, I think a behavioral-based detection approach is the way to go. I had 127 customers that had SolarWinds, and we were one of a list of companies who, when present, the SolarWinds attack would APT29 allegedly would exit and would suicide rather than lose the campaign. That accounted for about a quarter, because 3/4 of my customer base didn't have that. The 3/4 that didn't have it, we shot it because we do behavioral-based detection. And I think that eventually bad guys do bad things. Sideloading a DLL, yeah, it could be okay, especially if you listen to Apple these days. And then there's a DGA to go out to a foreign site. Then there's pulling down a file. And then there's escalation of privilege. And then there's lateral movement. Now, all of these maybe could be seen as relatively innocent, but a chain that's this 5 long, that's always bad. And so the other 3/4, the MALOps, as we call them, malicious operations, didn't get beyond 3 or 4 steps. So your question about where the future is going, I think we're going to see all attacks of significance will go to this deeper, buried in the system approach, whether it's supply chain or not. And by the way, this month is the 10th year anniversary of my own RSA hack, because I was one of the incident captains in that. And that was also a supply chain attack. We had both a tool that we were using that was infiltrated, that was called Actuate. It was meant to find when there was encrypted traffic across a boundary. And we also had our HR partner get compromised upstream, and there were 2 attackers. It was hideously complex, but that's 10 years ago. So it's not like that's really new. And I think so. I think what we've seen is ransomware has gone that way. Ransomware is not just a piece of malware that encrypts your hard drive. It's a tool that's used by an advanced operation. I call them ransom ops. Some people say multi-stage ransomware. The one thing I know for sure, it's the Einstein answer about what the next war will be fought with. I know that they're going to keep getting better. And eventually, I hope it doesn't come to axes and swords, but as he would have said. But I know they're going to get better iteratively, so we've got to get better faster.
Ricardo.
Well played on that. I think for us, you cannot do that level of in-depth analysis of all your vendors. And I think that's probably the hardest point, because I remember seeing it and going through the analysis like, great, we're going to do a code check for everything coming for every vendor every single time there's an update. It is operationally infeasible. And some of those organizations, actually most of them, will not do a code escrow with you anyway. So even if you wanted to get checks of their open source libraries and everything else, you don't have access to it. So it's going to be a combination of writing it into your contracts of secure SDLC, or possibly some other type of checks that you need to do if you're a 3rd or 4th party vendor. This area is still evolving from a response and maturity standpoint. I had a conversation with another CISO colleague, and he's like, even a well-built 3rd-party risk management program probably wouldn't have caught this. And if you even think about it, well, work on some of the smaller stuff that are more in your control. For example, do all the agents on your endpoints, workstation servers need to have local sys access or local system access? Really? Does it absolutely need to be there? Having those small changes could have at least mitigated or reduced the effectiveness of these type of attacks. Again, they're going to pivot and change once they understand that we're going to catch on, but it's that cat and mouse game that we need to continually play and get closer and closer. Because remember, the bad guys only have to be right once we have to block it every single time, which goes back to what you were talking about, Sam, being able to see the whole picture and deriving data and proper signals from that noise to be able to say, that does look weird, and maybe we should take a look at it, or just stop it dead in its tracks and move forward. So I think there's still a lot of maturity from that perspective. But outside of looking at the endpoints and the service accounts, we are taking a closer look at when we have our third-party assessments, looking at those fourth-party risks as well. And specifically, we're prioritizing any applications that would have layer 3 access to our environment. It's just an easier traversal point for them. So again, it's a work in progress. I hope that more items and more artifacts come out of this SolarWinds attack, because yes, it's horrible, but it's also a great learning opportunity and pivot. As many say, don't waste a good incident, learn from it, and implement compensating controls where appropriate.
Yeah, and by the way, my point about going upstream, there's no product coming for that. That's an innovation opportunity. That's I want to see somebody build it and then make it available as a Git plugin. And
that would be beautiful.
And then down the line, what people do is they're like, you know what? In my review program, I'm going to say, do you use this? So that downstream, I can get a confidence score of every update. That's not somebody came in and sold it to you. There's a developer in the open source community right now going, oh, I could do something like that. Or maybe there's a new business opportunity, or maybe there's a DARPA grant coming or something. That's what I mean by innovation. But you're right. Focus on the pragmatic.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I haven't seen any more questions come in, but one of the things that, and kind of going out, we did a survey prior to this event. One of the questions that we had from people who may be in more of an infrastructure or traditional networking role, who are very interested in moving into the cybersecurity space. Because as you know, at IT Savvy, we're a company that, we do both. We're not just a cybersecurity company. My piece is the cybersecurity piece. But for that person who's sitting at a company like Kraft Heinz and is thinking to themselves, man, that Ricardo is pretty amazing and a great leader. And I see these amazing people that are working for him, or Sam, that at Cybereason, like, look at this team he's built and look at the, the amazing things that they're talking about with each other. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of something important like that. What advice would you give to them if that's something that they would like to do as a career path for them?
Come on in. The water's warm. Like, no, really. It is daunting, and you don't know where to begin, but you don't have to. Like, you know how you eat an elephant, right? It's one bite at a time.
Poor
right.
elephant.
Poor elephant.
A
large chocolate elephant, life size. How's that? No elephants were hurt in making my analogy. I'm part of a group called Hacking into Cybersecurity, and I believe that not only can people do it, it's a daunting thing, right? There's people who have a sort of phobia of, do I have what it takes? Am I a crypto person? Can I code? Don't care. I used to say this about rugby. There's a role for every body type. There's a role for every personality type, and diversity is crucial, especially things like neurodiversity, in addition to the more classic types that are also vital, ethnic diversity and religious diversity and gender diversity. I don't want to leave any out, but we need people who can think like people who aren't already in here. Our opponents are diverse, and that's a competitive advantage, but we are better when we have more options and more ways of thinking. So anyway, hacking into cybersecurity is about showing people those pathways, and that nobody was like Babe Ruth pointing at the stands and then hitting the ball there. That's boring. Very few, I don't know about you, Ricardo, but I didn't start. I started out not in cyber and wound up here by the strangest of paths. And I think we want to encourage people to give it a try. And the best way to do it is start talking to someone about what do you need to know and start playing with stuff. That's very doable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sam, on the diversity and inclusiveness. One of my best incident response engineers has a musical background. That's where he came from, and he sees data and sees the text in a whole different light. So having those diverse backgrounds are absolutely crucial. But more importantly, getting to a point of you're an infrastructure individual and you're really interested in security, just ask. I do multiple stretch projects with other individuals in our organization. They're like, oh, that tool is really cool. You do some pretty neat stuff. Can I learn? speak to your manager and say, we'll do stretch projects. We have already 3 stretch projects around cloud security, advanced malware, and privacy automation. And they're stretch projects where someone's like, I'd like to learn more about automation. Come in. Totally cool. As long as you have the bandwidth, you can learn. You can ride shotgun and really get hands-on knowledge. So security doesn't bite. We love individuals, and the more we grow, the better we are as an industry to provide that depth of knowledge and that varied experiences. So spot on, Sam.
So I got a fun thing for you to tell your musician major once. There's a thing at University of California, Santa Barbara called the allosphere, and it was used for really big data visualization. So you know the X-Men, they have that big like sphere room with Professor X in the middle, and they render it. And I know we promised some geeky stuff, so this is it. And I thought to myself, visually, humans don't track that many objects. Like we track between 12 and 20. A pilot in the battlesphere can't track that many, for instance, between flying and the battle space and actual controls. But I think we might be able to do more in an auditory way or using other sensors. So I thought about doing a big data crunch where we would play music from logs, and that we would use machine learning to introduce harmony or disharmony. So plant that in the seat of your musician and let's see if they come up with something, because I'm too lazy to go do it myself.
That's pretty
awesome. I thought it would be, and I put in at University of California, Santa Barbara, I put in this request to take massive logs from companies or from volunteers and to either render a visualization or, I mean, imagine if it sounded like whale song when things are wailing and you hear a screech. Like, from my perspective, there are other ways to find anomalies than just a visual graph 2D format or even a 3D format. So I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent again, which I think I say way too much, but there's definitely potential for different ways of thinking about these things. And I had a musician in my SOC 6 years ago, so very different approaches to problems.
Yeah.
I think added encouragement. I mean, I was speaking with 2 CISO friends of mine fairly recently and kind of asking this question too, you know, intellectual curiosity always comes up, but they said they actually had built out a profile of what an ideal, they love a person who has like an Instagram that shows they're in a rock band on the weekends. And I'm like, that was the first time I had really heard that as something that had been identified. So you're not alone, both of you, in seeing that. Although, you know, obviously, you know, it's just one of many, you know, diverse backgrounds that people are tapping into. But I think it's encouraging to, you know, the folks that really are wondering, just knowing that it's just a matter of taking that leap. And I think it really leads into another conversation. I mean, as the organization becomes more and more, you know, the business relies on everything working, but also the security of that too, not interacting with productivity. And sorry, my dog, of course you were talking about the 3-year-old. My dog just ran. Anyway, sorry, she's making a little noise next to me.
We don't hear it.
What I wanted to make sure we covered too, and what I think you've both done a really good job, and I've seen you talk about this before, is bridging that gap between the silos within your organization. I mean, you're both so good at it. And so I think that it's a challenge that a lot of people have in communicating between the silos to achieve what really is the business objective for your company, the mission, if it's the military, and having that, you know, aligned endpoint and focus and level setting as an organization. So would you mind sharing a couple of examples or strategies that you have to de-silo your organization to achieve the ultimate objectives for your company?
You want me or
either one? Yeah, whoever wants to go first, but I really love both of you to answer it.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah,
Ricardo,
go ahead.
you can go first if you want. I have so much.
Sure. Oh no, I was gonna say, ooh, rock, paper, scissors. Yeah. Okay.
It would have been kind of fun.
Rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, I think.
For me, really breaking down the silos is on multiple aspects. One, you want to ensure that you have a good collaborative relationship with the business, but also IT. In many organizations, security is bundled under IT, but they also act independently and autonomously for some good reasons and then some bad reasons. It breaks that silo. It's IT and then security. So one thing any organization I've been in is you need to bridge that gap and be a collaborative partner with them right out of the gate. For example, if there's an issue with a firewall or a router and have a network security specialist, offer them the network security specialist to help them troubleshoot an issue. Have that olive branch and you buy goodwill that you're not coming in to ruin a project or cause delays, and have that good feel relationship with them. So IT is a little bit easier because you kind of speak the same language. When you start moving over to like HR and your core business functions, it's a different approach, and it's more of one of inclusiveness and groupthink is what I like to call it. If you want to say implement a new acceptable use policy, you want to get the buy-in from HR, marketing, and a few other key stakeholders, and you bring the approach that you're here to modernize and help the user experience and build additional controls. So what I like to call it is I'm removing doors instead of putting up doors from a security perspective. And how do I take the approach of removing doors is I want to give freedom within a framework and allow individuals to be able to do their job with guardrails, almost very similar to DevOps model or DevSecOps model. Give them enough wiggle room as long as they can't hurt themselves. And I think showing that non-draconian approach to the business gives you a lot more leeway as a business partner and enabler than being one that says, well, you accept credit cards, so you're not ever going to accept credit cards because you're not PCI compliant, yada, yada, yada. It's more of, sure, you want to take payments, let's do this in a safe, secure manner, and thank you for bringing me up front, so we'll work together to do this on your timeline. So it's more of that collaborative approach. And also, I'm quite jovial. I come in, security normally is like very fist to the ground. I'm here to put controls. I'm here to safeguard. That's all true, but it's all about your approach and how you take it to the business. I came in to say, I'm here to transform the organization. Like, oh, great. He's just going to throw controls everywhere. It's like, no, my core business is ensuring the organization can operate in a safe, secure manner and ensure that user experience is first and foremost in everything I put in from a controls or process perspective. It's gone a long way. It works pretty well.
Yeah, and my org's different. I'm a CISO who reports to the CEO, and we don't have a CIO. So actually, my first meeting with the highest-ranking IT manager, he was a little nervous because he had no CIO for air cover and reported into R&D. And I said, I really want to try to help you roll stuff out. And he laughed. Like, he involuntarily laughed because he thought I was going to be Dr. No. And he said, well, I'm trying to do this, this, and this. I said, okay, let's see if we can turn some controls off and make that happen. Stunned, because we're in the business of accepting risks, not pursuing a perfect reference architecture. And I think the biggest problem in security is, in fact, lack of alignment to business. Yeah. And to be fair, if I look, I saw two fascinating statistics. The first one was 4 years ago that said 23% of people who have the CISO title have a substance abuse problem, which tells me I'm not fun enough, first of all. And secondly, I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but secondly, that we have the shortest tenure, we have the shortest tenure, of time and grade of all the C-levels. CEOs have the most. CFOs right behind them. And it's actually, if you look in time, when these positions became solidified in our corporate cultures, the earliest ones last the longest. The CIO is low, but it's well ahead of the CISO and the CSO. And when you think about it, there's reasons for that. And it's this terrible waste. So I've seen as low as 13 months, as high as 24 months. I think you can Google it and say average tenure for a CISO, and they'll bring it up, and you can do it for every C-level position. And it's terrible waste because our best and brightest are burning out, is what that says. And the reason is stress. And the reason is because they live under perpetual fear of being, in case of emergency, break glass and fire, or they don't know how to do triage for what they want to align with the business or how to turn up and have a business conversation. And I'll explain what happened to me once. You can look at my LinkedIn. I lasted at one position for 8 months. And I turned up, and I'm used to, as a security guy, being the smartest person in the room and demonstrating it, and leaping on security, right? Like it's the last piece of cake. I would jump on it, right? And that's a bad image. But but what I did was I didn't give others a chance to own it at the C level. And they already knew I was the smartest security guy. They wanted to see I was a business guy. They wanted me to be interested in what's happening with that new finance, process. What's happened? Like, they wanted me to be genuinely a participant in those things as a business person. And I wasn't giving them a chance to have any ownership. And we don't train security people coming up in the ranks how to do that well enough. There's a huge jump when they get to management, another huge jump when they get to the C level. And so I think it's this, the biggest problem in security is the lack of alignment of security with the business. You're going to keep your boss happy, and the people below you will keep you happy. None of your peers have to do anything for you for them. And I'm a big proponent of turn up and solve the business problem, and then look at the risks and say, is the trade-off right? And having that as a dialogue. So hopefully that adds a little, but yeah, we need to do more at not being the office of no.
Yeah.
I think that's extremely beneficial to those on the phone as well. Everyone, and again, the participants today, and looking at who is joining us from various different companies, various sizes, but I think that that's true for everyone. Just that alignment, and I think that definitely take that to heart myself. And coming up to the last minute of this conversation, which it went by very, very quickly. So I really appreciate, and I am really glad that other people got to have the same opportunity to be a fly on the wall with a conversation with you two. And I really hope and thank everyone for their time, and thank you both for your time today. The last question that someone asked, and I'm just so thankful we got one more in the Q&A, was we can all answer this in probably 2 seconds, and I can even answer it. It's just, where are the networking events? What's great about being remote right now, and I'm very positive, a good thing for me is now I'm able to attend all kinds of events I wouldn't normally have been able to have gotten on an airplane and go see. I seek out events that are sometimes not even cybersecurity related. Yesterday, I attended an event that was really for lawyers, but it had cybersecurity practitioners and CISOs from large companies talking about data privacy law, but in the context of a cybersecurity program. And I learned a lot. I made some new, some different connections with various women on that panel. So it's just a matter of being creative too, leveraging your social media. I listen to things on Clubhouse. I don't know if anyone does that. There's a lot of just little things that you can jump in on panels that you would normally in a normal environment not have access to. So I encourage you all to just go ahead and seek those things out in maybe a less traditional way, via social media. What about you two? Just 1 second on a couple of good ones.
I have two to throw in, and Ricardo can throw some in. One is I did a CISO game night the other day, which was we used Tabletop Simulator, so you could play a board game together, which was really cool. If you haven't checked it out, you can get it on Steam. It's fun, and I should have invited you, Ricardo, but
thanks.
It was a regional one, and you will be on the next one. We could even do that sometime if we can figure out the kinks in the system. The other one is prior to COVID, we used to do meetups with Bring Your Spouse or Your Significant Other, and because we all knew each other in the community, but we didn't spend time breaking bread together. Ricardo, you got any?
I'd say for me, we have a industry by industry within Kraft Heinz. We do video game night once a week. Where we rotate different video games. Again, it's just more of that de-stressing from work and just having a really good, relaxed time. And I never took advantage of meetup.coms in our area for cybersecurity related, and also just overall data and IT. And I've been attending those a lot more frequently just to get, again, the different perspectives, and also secretly recruiting. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely Sarah Tam asked that question. Just definitely be creative and don't be shy, and sign up for those events and show up, and you'll meet interesting people like Sam and Ricardo and others in the space. And so, thank you for that question. But we're actually 1 minute over, so I'm going to go ahead and conclude the webinar.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. I hope this was productive for everyone, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the next Thought Series leadership event in another 6 weeks. I already have a very exciting person lined up. I can't announce it yet, but I'll let you know who it is. It's very soon.
Have fun. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.